Hello! Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be trying out acrylic gouache for the very first time. Now, this is a medium that has mystified me and intrigued me for like a year now. I really wanted to use this medium and I just never got around to doing it. I never got around to figuring out what the best brands were, anything like that. And then finally, the other week, I sat down and I got so interested that I wanted to figure it out, and so I did, and here they are, and I have them. One thing that really struck me about these is that I could never figure out like how they actually acted or what I was supposed to expect from them, so I was really intrigued when I got them to see how they would perform and what they would be like. Initially, one of the first things that really struck me about how they performed was that they seem to have a really high pigment load. I've heard a lot of people explain them kind of like just gouache but permanent or non-rewettable, but to me they were something completely on their own. They weren't comparable to gouache at all. To me they felt more like a mixture between watercolors and acrylic. I find them to be really transparent compared to what I've heard other people say, and I also find that they don't dry very matte like gouache does. All in all, I feel like they dry and act a lot like watercolors, and it might just be because I use pretty low quality gouache or because I haven't used very high quality acrylic or gouache, but these seem a lot more like watercolors to me than anything else. These are from Holbein, so they would have a lot of pigment load you would expect. This is just a shot of the white to show you kind of what I mean. This is the white from the acrylic gouache set. This is, as you can see, it's really transparent and not very opaque and really shiny to use. It's not that creamy like texture that you would usually get from gouache. And it's kind of annoying to work with. Like, I don't like to work with the white in this set. And just for comparison, this is a white gouache from Schminke from my gouache palette. Excuse the messiness of this fucking palette. But just to show it, I use just as much water from each of them, but this is just to show how opaque a gouache white, like this is what I expected the white to be like. And it just wasn't that, clearly. Now, for this next part, I wanted to explain a bit about the colors that I chose, because this isn't a set. This isn't like a set you can buy. I just bought these colors individually. I bought a yellow, basically a medium to deep orangey yellow, and I bought a magenta color, and then I bought a very warm blue. And I did this because of the type of colors that I usually use in my work, and the type of colors that I usually don't use that much, or the colors that I want to be bright and those I don't care about being bright. So basically, for me, I like my purples and my warm blues and my cold reds to be really bright, because I use those colors a lot and I use them in very bright ways a lot. They're usually my main colors, and so I cared a lot about those being easy to mix, and for my purples to be easy to mix. And secondly, I cared about my warm reds being easy to mix, and my oranges being easy to mix, and to have really bright oranges. And greens, I don't usually use really bright greens, I usually use dull greens anyway, so it didn't really matter to me if I couldn't mix bright greens. So that's why I've ended up with a warm blue, a warm yellow, and a cold red, because that's the mix that made the most sense to me for those variations that I needed. The other colors that I bought were a black and a white. I did this mainly because it fits what I usually would work with in a gouache set. Now, it turned out to be slightly less useful when I actually used the paints, because I ended up not really using the white all that much, and I ended up not using the black very much, but I might use it in the future, who knows. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with the colors that I chose. I think they mix pretty well. I was worried that they weren't going to mix the way I wanted them to, and I was going to have dull colors, but it ended up being okay. Here I am going to be checking what the paint looks like in thicker layers. So I wanted to see if it worked anything like acrylic, like if the texture you leave actually stays or if it just flattens out. And over on this other side, I wanted to test how much the paint flows when placed in a wash. And as you're going to see, I basically did this by wetting an area and then dropping some color into one side of it and seeing how much the paint flows towards the other side. And this paint was very flowy. Now, I don't know if I just, like, people who know more about acrylic wash, please tell me, but like, I don't know if it's just the colors that I picked specifically, because I don't know if you can really tell from this chart, but the yellow is way more opaque than the red and the blue. So I'm having a lot of really transparent mixes with the red and the blue, and slightly less the yellow, and the black also seems pretty opaque. So I don't know if I just picked weird colors to represent acrylic wash, but it seems like these colors are very different from what I've seen other people do with acrylic wash. I'm thinking the same thing about the white, actually, because I know sometimes in watercolors there are whites in watercolors, but they're supposed to be kind of like, some of them are supposed to be kind of transparent, and I don't know if I just bought that type of white and I just bought the wrong kind of white. I don't know, but like, please let me know if you can help me. Maybe the white is just bad. I don't know. Maybe it's meant to be this way. I mean, I know nothing. I'm a newbie at this. So sorry, acrylic wash lovers out there, if I'm using your favorite art supply all wrong. I know how much it hurts. I'm really sorry. Basically, here's just a close-up of the swatches. I kind of noticed on the ultramarine and the mixes with the ultramarine that there's something that looks kind of like granulation, and I wasn't sure if it was, because usually I've never really had my gouache granulate at all, even when I use colors that would usually granulate in it. So I was really like interested and like kind of not shocked, but like a little bit that I saw granulation in it. Here's just a picture so you can see it better. I definitely think that's granulation, but just to make sure, I did an extra swatch here. Granulation shows up a lot more when there's a lot of water added to a wash. So what I did here was basically just add a bunch of the paint and add a bunch of water into this wash. And I tried to sort of gradate it out a little bit, because sometimes granulation shows better in certain parts of like a graded wash, and I didn't want to like miss out on it or like accidentally paint it in a way that made it not show up when it was actually going to be there. But granulation is basically when the pigment either clumps together because it is hydrophobic, or when it is really heavy and settles into the grooves of the paper, and so there's this texture that comes up. And I know ultramarine usually is a granulating pigment, but I just wasn't expecting it in anything other than watercolors, to be honest. Here's a swatch of the yellow just to compare it to next to, because the yellow is definitely not granulating. And here in a moment I'm gonna show you what the paint looks like after it dried. There you go. Now, as you can tell, I think that's definitely granulation. Just a note, I don't know if it actually matters at all for the painting, but just it at least adds to the idea that this paint acts a lot more like watercolors than it does like gouache. On to the tryout painting! Now, this is the first painting I've ever done with acrylic wash. Be nice. But basically, from what I saw of the acrylic wash during the swatching and everything, I basically concluded that it was similar to watercolors, and that I was going to try and use it like I would use watercolors. Because also, I'm not that good at gouache, like in general. I haven't used it as much as I've used watercolors, and honestly, I don't really know what I'm doing when I use gouache, so trying to use it like watercolor seemed a lot more comforting to me, and it made me feel like I kind of knew what I was doing, and honestly it went pretty well. Like, I had no problems using this as a watercolor, which adds to my theory that I have wanted this medium all along. This is the medium I have been searching for. It is watercolors where I can lay down all the layers I want and I don't have to worry about re-wetting the underlying layers in the process. It's awesome. I like this a lot. However, there were a few things that kind of bothered me about parts of using like a non-rewettable medium. Like, for example, having to get used to having it in a palette and getting used to the fact that I can't re-wet it was kind of a struggle because it kept drying up on me, certain parts of it, or I kept leaving like stains on the palette because I couldn't get it off and I couldn't wash it off after it had dried, which was really annoying, and it dirtied up my palette so quick. It was also kind of frustrating to basically only be able to mix one color at a time because otherwise the color would dry out on me. So I had to constantly be working in the same areas one after another, or it would be a huge waste of time to keep mixing the same color over and over again, like after each other, which I usually will just like lay out a bunch of colors on my palette and then sort of go back into each one whenever I feel like it. So having to mix the same colors a lot was kind of challenging. And also it just stressed me out a bit that they were gonna dry up on me. Like, I have all the time in the world with watercolors, but with these it was like, fuck, like, they need to not dry up and I need to keep making sure that they're not drying up and that everything's going fine while I'm painting. That kind of stressed me out, but I think it's also just because I'm so used to working with watercolors at this point that it's so integral in how I work that I can re-wet everything again and that I can like do it over. So it was just kind of a matter of getting used to working with this medium, I think. I don't think it's actually anything that's like bad about it at all. And also I found the color selection worked, which was great. I could have used a bright red just because I used it a lot, and it might be nice to have one because I find mixed reds are often just fall a bit flat. I don't know if it was just the colors I had, but just my experience. So that might have been nice. Other than that, I think one of the only other improvements I would make is that I would want a white that can actually do what I want it to do, that's actually opaque, because this white was just not it, man. It was not it. Like, I don't know if I just need to get used to the medium and it just isn't how it works. Like, if it's just not how it works, then that's fine. If I just misunderstood something, that's completely okay. But it was kind of frustrating when I was expecting like a gouache kind of white, like an opaque, like milky white, and when it then wasn't, it was really annoying me because I really like that effect. I really like that like flatness and stuff. Here's my head a bunch of times. Yay. Anyways, but I felt that I wanted something else from that white, and I wanted that gouache-like effect, and it just wasn't there, and that was kind of annoying because I'd kind of been looking forward to that and to being able to lay down those like thick, like milky layers, and then being able to work on top of that without being worried that I was going to re-wet those layers. That was something I'd been looking forward to, so it was kind of annoying that I couldn't have that. But honestly, other than that, this was amazing. Like, this was like an epiphany. This was like, I loved working with this medium a lot, and I expect to be working with it a lot more in the future as well. Like, I dug this medium. It's awesome because I'm also a watercolor artist who I don't really use lifting techniques a lot in my art, like at all. I don't usually work like that. I usually work in glazing and in things that require really staining paints anyway, and I like a lot of really staining paints, and I use staining paints for most of my artworks, and it's just really nice to have have a medium where I can use a certain color and not have to worry about whether I'm gonna re-wet it when I put another color over it. So all in all, this has been a very, very positive experience. I don't know if I said, but these are all from Holbein, these gouache paints. Here's what the painting looked like in the end. I have another speed paint on this channel that is a very similar theme. I like it a lot. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope to see you soon. I upload every week. See you!
Remember to like and subscribe if you liked the video.